There is a battle in the Bible that defies all military logic and human history, a victory so impossible that it can only be explained by the supernatural intervention of God. 300 men defeating 135,000 enemies. But the most extraordinary thing? It is not the numbers, it is who led this victory. A fearful young man who threshed wheat hidden in the winepress. His name was Gideon. Today you will discover how God transforms cowards into warriors, the weak into powerful, the fearful into victorious leaders. You will understand why God reduces numbers to amplify miracles, and how He can use you, with all your fears and limitations, to do the impossible. If you want to learn about the most impossible battle in biblical history, like this video right now. Subscribe to the channel to receive more stories that show the supernatural power of God. Share it with someone who is facing impossible situations, and turn on notifications. This journey through Gideon's life can transform your understanding of what God can do through you. My name is Brian, and for the next hour, we're going to delve into the most epic story of victory against impossible odds. You'll learn how God chooses the weak to confound the mighty, how He uses the few to defeat the many, and how your greatest weakness can become the site of the greatest manifestation of divine power. Prepare your heart, because Gideon's story isn't just about an ancient battle, it's about how God can use anyone, no matter how fearful, to achieve extraordinary victories. The cowardly man and the laggard understand the magnitude of Gideon's miracle. We need to understand the context of terror in which Israel lived, and the unlikely young man God chose to deliver them. Judges 6:1-2. But the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel, and because of Midian the children of Israel made for themselves the dens which are in the mountains, and the caves, and the strongholds. 7 years of absolute terror. Israel was living like rats, hiding in caves, mountain dens, makeshift fortresses. It was a state of national panic, where no one felt safe. And it came to pass, when Israel sowed, that the Midianites and the Amalekites came up, and set themselves against them, and destroyed the fruits of the land, and left no food in Israel, neither sheep, nor oxen, nor ass. The Midianites didn't just conquer, they completely devastated. They waited for Israel to plant and work. Then they came like locusts and destroyed everything. It was devastating psychological and economic warfare, for they came up with their cattle and tents. They came like locusts, so numerous that neither they nor their camels could be counted, and they came into the land to destroy it. A massive coalition of nomadic tribes, so Israel became very poor because of the Midianites. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. It was national rock bottom, complete impoverishment, and utter despair. Before calling Gideon, God sent an anonymous prophet to confront Israel about their idolatry. It was spiritual preparation for the physical deliverance to come. Judges 6:11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ephraim, and Gideon his son was threshing wheat in the winepress. To hide it from the Midianites, Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress. Winepresses were for treading grapes, not threshing wheat. Wheat is threshed on open, ventilated threshing floors. Gideon was doing this in the most improvised place possible out of sheer fear. Threshing wheat in the winepress was inefficient, laborious, and humiliating. But the fear of the Midianites was greater than the shame of the method. Gideon preferred to work in hiding rather than be discovered. I met a businessman who told me, "Brian, my company was failing because of aggressive competitors. Like Gideon, I was threshing wheat in the winepress, doing everything secretly, fearfully, without boldness. When I understood that God wanted to use me, everything changed." The fact that Gideon was working, even in precarious conditions, reveals his character. He wasn't lazy or complacent, he was fearful, but he was hardworking. He was exactly the kind of person God could mold. Gideon was of the tribe of Manasseh, the family of Joash and Abizret. He was of good lineage, but that did not protect him from the general terror that gripped Israel. God knew exactly where to find Gideon, his moment of greatest fear and vulnerability. It was there, in the makeshift winepress, that the greatest transformation of a coward into a hero in biblical history would begin. Gideon was processing wheat, a symbol of sustenance and life. Unbeknownst to him, he was being prepared by God to process and sustain the life of an entire nation. Sometimes the places where we hide out of fear are exactly where God comes to find us. Our winnow presses of shame can become places of divine calling. If you are threshing wheat in the winepress, doing things improvisedly in fear, hidden, know that God can meet you right there and transform your life completely. The so-called impossible at the most unlikely time, in the most inappropriate place, with the most fearful person. God decided to make his most audacious call. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor." Imagine the scene: Gideon sweating, hiding, scared to death, and an angel calls him mighty man of valor. Mighty man of valor. It was the greatest irony or the greatest prophecy in history. Gideon didn't feel brave. He didn't act brave, but God saw him as brave. God doesn't call us for what we are, but for what we can become. Then Gideon said to him, "Oh my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And what has become of all his wonders, which our fathers told us about?" Gideon questioned God's presence because he couldn't reconcile present suffering with stories of past glory. It was a common crisis of faith. Where is God when we need him? Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you will save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? Go in this thy strength." What strength? Gideon was hiding, scared to death. But God saw strength where Gideon saw weakness. Sometimes our greatest strength is hidden in our apparent weakness. Then I said to him, "Oh my Lord, with what can I save Israel? See, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." Gideon saw himself as the poorest family in the tribe, the smallest in the family, insignificant among the insignificant. It was an inferiority complex multiplied, but God chooses precisely those who feel smallest. And the Lord said unto him, "For I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man." God promised presence, not just power. Then I said to him, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, show me a sign that it is you who are talking to me." Gideon asked for confirmation, not out of disbelief, but out of insecurity. Gideon prepared a young goat, and unleavened bread, a substantial offering for someone from a poor family. It revealed a generous heart even in times of scarcity. Then the angel of the Lord stretched out the end of his staff, and touched the meat and the unleavened bread. And fire came up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. It was undeniable supernatural confirmation. A pastor told me, "Brian, when God called me to ministry, I was like Gideon, of fears and insecurities. I asked for signs, and God graciously gave me supernatural confirmations that strengthened my faith. And when Gideon saw that it was the angel of the Lord, he said, 'Ah, Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.'" The encounter with the saint produced reverent fear, but the Lord said to him, "Peace be to you. Do not fear, you will not die." God reassured Gideon. His presence brings peace, not death, to those he calls. And Gideon built an altar there unto the Lord, and called it Jehovah Shalom. The Lord is peace. That was what Gideon most needed to learn before he went to war. Before fighting external enemies, Gideon had to destroy family idols. God always begins transformation with internal purification. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants, and did as the Lord had told him. And it came to pass, that he was afraid of his father's house, and of the men of the city, that he did it by night. Gideon obeyed, but fearfully. He did the right thing, but at night. Sometimes God accepts our fearful obedience while he works on our courage. It is progress, even if imperfect. The city was furious and wanted to kill Gideon. Ironically, the man who would free them was almost killed by them before he even began his mission. If Gideon's transformation from fearful to called is inspiring you to believe that God can use your life, leave a like so more people can see this hope. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We have much more on how God uses the unlikely. Share this with anyone who feels too small to be used by God. And turn on notifications. We'll see the most impossible battle in history. The divine reduction of the army, with Gideon finally answering the call. The time came to form the army. But God had completely different plans than any military strategist would recommend. Judges 6:34. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew an alarm, and the Abiezrites gathered themselves together after him. It was a supernatural transformation. The fearful man became an inspiring leader. The Spirit clothed Gideon. In Hebrew, it means that the Spirit of God clothed him like armor. The coward was being supernaturally equipped for leadership and warfare. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and it also gathered itself together after him. And he sent messengers to Asher, and to Zebulun, and to Naphtali, and they went up to meet them. Israel responded massively to the call. Gideon, still unsure, asked for another sign, the famous fleece test. He asked for the fleece to be wet, and the ground to be dry, then vice versa. It was a search for absolute security. J.G. Sechi, Unden, Jarabo, that is, Gideon and all. The people who were with him rose early and encamped by the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was on the north side. And the Lord said to Gideon, "The people are too many with you for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel boast against me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" God said 32,000 soldiers was too many. In human warfare, the more soldiers, the better. In God's warfare, numbers can get in the way because people glory in numbers instead of glorifying God. Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, "Whoever is fearful and timid, let him return and depart quickly from Mount Gilead." So 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. 22,000 men were gone. Nearly 70% of the army disappeared when the fearful were given permission to leave. It was a brutal reduction that tested Gideon's faith. And the Lord said unto Gideon, The people are yet too many. Bring them down unto the water, that I may try them for you there. Even 10,000 was still too many for God. He wanted to reduce them still further. And it came to pass, that every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. And every one that kneeleth down upon his knees to drink, a businessman told me. Brian, my company had a lot of incompetent employees. Like Gideon, I had to drastically reduce the staff. The few who stayed were more efficient than the hundreds who left. I realized that quality trumps quantity. Only 300 men lapped the water like dogs, remaining vigilant. 9,700 knelt, making themselves vulnerable. God chose the vigilant, those who remained ready, even while drinking water. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. And all the rest of the people knelt down on their knees to drink water. Then the Lord said to Gideon, By the 300 men who lapped I will save you, and I will deliver the Midianites into your hand. 300 against 135,000. It was an absolute mathematical impossibility. Uncorinches, only Vinci Sech explains the divine strategy. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. And God chose the weak things of the world to shame the things which are mighty. God reduces numbers to amplify miracles. The smaller the human army, the greater the divine glory and victory. It is a spiritual principle. God glorifies himself more when we do less. Seeing Gideon's fear, God sent him to spy on the enemy camp, where he heard a prophetic dream about his victory. It was the final encouragement before battle. Sometimes God has to reduce our human resources so that we depend completely on his supernatural resources. When we reach the end of our strength, we begin to experience God's infinite power. The impossible battle with only 300 men against 135,000 enemies. The moment arrived for the most impossible battle in history, and God's strategy was as unusual as the numbers. Judges 7:16, And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies. And he gave every man a trumpet in his hand, and empty pitchers and torches in the pitchers. What an arsenal! It wasn't swords, spears, bows, or shields. It was horns, empty pitchers, and torches. It was the most unusual military strategy in human history. And he said unto them, Look unto me, and do even so as I do. And behold, when I come to the edge of the camp, it shall be, that as I do, so shall ye do. The battle was planned for the midnight watch, a time when the enemy would be fast, asleep, vulnerable, and disoriented. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you shall blow the trumpets all around the camp, and say, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. It was a prophetic declaration that victory belonged to God, with Gideon as his instrument. It was faith proclaimed aloud. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the edge of the camp, at the beginning of the midnight watch, and they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands, and the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers. And they had the torches in their left hand, and the trumpets in their right hand, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow. Even throughout the whole camp, God made the 135,000 enemies fight each other. The sound of the horns, the sudden light of the torches, the war cry, all created total panic that resulted in fratricidal battle. Gideon's 300 didn't need to fight. They just made noise, lit torches, and shouted. God did the rest. The Midianites slaughtered each other in total panic, and the army fled as far as Bethsheba, and the men of Israel, and of Asher, and of all Manasseh, were called together, and pursued the Midianites. A pastor told me, Brian, our church was under attack by intense spiritual forces. Instead of fighting with carnal methods, we organized prayer vigils. As Gideon organized his attack, God confused our enemies, and they turned on each other. Why the horns and torches? They simulated a much larger army surrounding the camp. In the darkness, in their panic, the Midianites thought they were being attacked by superior forces. Judges 8:10, and Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkar, and their armies with them, about 15,000 men. All that were left of the whole army of the children of the east, and those that fell were 120,000 men, 120,000 enemy dead. It was an absolute and complete defeat. A victory so overwhelming that Israel was free from oppression for decades. No one could say that the victory was due to human merit. 300 men do not defeat 135,000 by military competence, only by divine intervention. God uses methods that seem crazy to the world. His strategies defy human logic so that all the glory goes to him. The fearful young man who threshed wheat in secret had become the commander of the most impossible victory in history. It was complete transformation by the power of God. Horns, to proclaim victory before it was achieved. Broken pitchers to let the light shine. Torches to bring light into the darkness. Each instrument had prophetic symbolism. This battle proves that when God fights for us, numbers don't matter, weapons don't matter, experience doesn't matter. What matters is obedience to his strategy and trust in his power. Lessons for our battles today. Gideon's victory is not just ancient history, it is a spiritual playbook for our impossible battles today. Powerful lessons from the story of Gideon. 1. God sees us by potential, not by current condition. Gideon was fearful, but God called him valiant. God sees what we can become, not just what we are now. 2. Fearful obedience is better than courageous disobedience. Gideon obeyed even though he was afraid. God prefers our trembling obedience to our confident disobedience. 3. God reduces to amplify. Fewer soldiers resulted in greater divine glory. Sometimes God reduces our resources to increase our dependence on Him. 4. God's strategies defy human logic. Horns and torches have defeated swords and spears. God's ways seem foolish to the world, but they are wisdom to those who believe. 5. Impossible victories exclusively glorify God. When victory is humanly impossible, all glory goes to God. It is His goal in our battles. Accept God's calling, even if you feel inadequate. Obey God's instructions, even if they seem strange. Trust more in God's presence than in human resources. Proclaim victory before you see it manifested. Expect God to confound your enemies. Give all glory to God when victory comes. A businesswoman told me, "Brian, my company was going bankrupt due to unfair competition. I applied Gideon's principles. I reduced the team to the essentials, changed the strategy to something unusual, and trusted in God. Today we are market leaders." It was an impossible victory that can only be credited to God. We have reached the end of this epic journey through the life of Gideon. You have discovered today that God specializes in transforming the fearful into warriors, the weak into the powerful, the few into the many. The story of Gideon teaches us that no matter how impossible your situation seems, how inadequate you feel, how few resources you have, when God fights for you, victory is assured. Declare with me, "I am brave in God's eyes. He can use my weakness to show His power. My impossible battles are opportunities for divine miracles. I am a Gideon in my generation. God fights for me, and victory is certain." If Gideon's story sparked your faith that God can use you to achieve impossible victories, leave your like now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more stories that demonstrate God's supernatural power. Share this with anyone facing impossible battles. Accept God's calling even if you feel inadequate. Obey God's instructions even if they seem strange. Trust more in God's presence than in human resources. Proclaim victory before you see it manifested. Expect God to confound your enemies. Give all glory to God when victory comes. A businesswoman told me, "Brian, my company was going bankrupt due to unfair competition. I applied Gideon's principles. I reduced the team to the essentials, changed the strategy to something unusual, and trusted in God. Today, we are market leaders." It was an impossible victory that can only be credited to God. We have reached the end of this epic journey through the life of Gideon. You have discovered today that God specializes in transforming the fearful into warriors, the weak into the powerful, the few into the many. The story of Gideon teaches us that no matter how impossible your situation seems, how inadequate you feel, how few resources you have, when God fights for you, victory is assured. Declare with me, "I am brave in God's eyes. He can use my weakness to show His power. My impossible battles are opportunities for divine miracles. I am a Gideon in my generation. God fights for me, and victory is certain." If Gideon's story sparked your faith that God can use you to achieve impossible victories, leave your like now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more stories that demonstrate God's supernatural power. Share this with anyone facing impossible battles. And here's my prophetic challenge. Comment below on this sentence: "God can use my weakness to show His power." I want to see how many of you believe that God turns fearful people into warriors. May God bless you, and may the peace of the Eternal be with you.